expressions that we make, the movements that we do day by day. There are many ways we can observe this. We can basically just go out and see it. But of course, there's a scientific approach to it. It's part of us to basically reflect what do we have to do day to day. Do we eat? Do we sleep? Do we pray? Do we recite the Quran? Do we actually speak of good? Or do we speak of like bad things? On the other hand, basically, the other part is actually the opposite of that. That is the mental processes. These are more internal and it's covered. It's hidden. It's basically activity of the mind, thinking, feeling, and remembering. These are basically a reflection of like, what do we think about on the day-to-day basis? How do we feel? And on top of that, of course, it also encompasses of the spiritual aspect, the personal relations that we have with the divine being, that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, and also our personal reflection of things that cannot be seen, for example, the hereafter, alam barzakh, and also basically and like on top of that, of course, how we basically have the idea that there's also heaven and hell. There are many topics in psychology itself, all right? The human is basically the main subject. The human is the main subject, and we are basically trying our best to understand whatever it is that the humans do, whatever it is that they think, and whatever it is that they ponder upon. In Western field, of course, there have been suggestions of what do we look at? We look at sensation and perception. How do we feel the things around us, and how do we see them? For example, as we have our eyes, our nose, our tongue, basically to test, and our basically skins to basically have a tactile perception itself. How do we perceive this? How do we see the fact that there's a butterfly flying? How do we see the fact that the sky is up there? And then another one, perhaps we have the human motivation aspect. What drives us? Is it the right driver? Are we being driven by our own desires, our own us, or our intellectual mind? How does it lead us to do things that are either wrong or right? We also have the focus of mental health. Basically, this is the most common topic that has been discovered and also discussed by many scholars, as well as now it's been an item of communication in our day-to-day life, because how important is the realization that mental health has a severe impact. It's no longer a taboo topic, but rather something that people have been raising for the purpose of awareness. And we have the conscious and unconscious facets of human mind, which is actually interesting because despite the fact that psychology being a scientific field that is actually trying to observe what is rather what we consider as tangible, what we consider as something that we can study about, but there is actually idea about the unconscious, including how do we sleep, and also the fact that there might be parts of us that can never be seen or be observed itself, but yet how do we study them? How do we study the spiritual relationship that we have with the Creator? How do we study the social connection that we have with others? How do we study kindness? How do we study what do you call that? Anxiety? How do we study what else do we sorry, pardon me. How do we study envy? How do we study memories? We can also study about the thinking mind, intelligence, language, and also finally, understanding about human as social beings. Again, this is about our interpersonal relationships with other creators of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are the various topics within psychology. Each of them holds important in our understanding of psychology and also our understanding of Islam itself. Without the understanding of the creator and the creation, the purpose itself, none of this would hold any values to us. The values of understanding this can actually be interpreted in two from my perspective. Number one is understanding. Number two is improvements. Understanding is in regard to understanding for the understanding what we are, who we are, and why we are here. And on top of that understanding, basically our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is the creator, understanding us as the creation, as the vicegerent, and understanding everything around us. Because even in the Quran, it's been mentioned that the people, if you should be in doubt about the resurrection, then consider that indeed we created you from dust, then from a sperm drop, then from a clinging clot, and then from a lump of flesh. Form and unformed that we may show you, and we settle in the wombs whom we will spell for a specified term, then we bring you out as a child, and then we develop you that you may reach your time of maturity. And among you is he who he is taken in early death, and among you is he who is returned to the most decrepit old age, so that he knows, after once having knowledge, nothing. And you see the earth barren, but when it sent down upon it rain, it quivers and swells and grows something of every beautiful kind. Now, without the knowledge of Islam, we wouldn't understand our purpose here. But without the knowledge of the earth itself and what we can do, the boundaries that we have, we wouldn't be able to understand the creation. We need to basically have both sides of the knowledge, and basically through research, which is the main purpose eventually, is actually to uncover the knowledge itself, uncover the true knowledge about us, what we are capable of, what we should do, what we shouldn't do in this world, especially guiding us ultimately to death and of course for the hereafter. All right, that understanding is incredibly powerful. Besides that, what do we do with the knowledge that we have basically embed within us? We have to put it into practice. So therefore, improvements is what we need. And so those who are given knowledge and may know that it is the truth from your Lord, and therefore believe in it, and their hearts humbly submit to it. And indeed is Allah the guide of those who have believed to a straight path. Eventually, our journey in this world is really about continuously improving ourselves so that we never ever lead ourselves astray from the Siratul Mustaqim itself. So therefore, if we are truly the believers, we're not only going to seek for knowledge, but we're going to see how it will eventually put itself to our own benefits, not just in this world, but also in the hereafter itself. So in regards to the psychology itself, of course, aside from the topic, there are actually many fields that actually have their own way of guiding and inspiring what kind of knowledge should we search for, what kind of practice should we focus on. In the origin of psychology, there are various modern perspectives itself. So we have the psychodynamic perspectives, we have the humanistic perspective, we have the socio-cultural perspective, the evolutionary perspective. We have the behavioral perspectives, the cognitive perspectives, the biopsychological perspective, then the soulful perspective. The soulful perspective is actually a reflection of our own department of psychology, the journey that we're trying to embark on that is actually to develop and also expand the science of soul itself. Understanding the fact that, we cannot study about human without understanding the fact that we are not just a being. We're not just a being with the physical aspect and the thinking aspect. We're also a being with soul, created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, breathed into us basically the moment when we're in the womb itself. If we were to take into the humanistic perspective, for example, the humanistic perspective believe that the optimistic idea that when as a human being, whatever it is that we do is about the growth, positive growth aspect. For the psychodynamic perspective aspect, they really focus on the fact that a lot of things that has happened in the past and the formation of our unconscious mind leads us to behave the way we do. For example, especially how our parents trained us, how our parents taught us, and basically how we were shaped when we were young, develop this basically unconscious thoughts within us that guides us. So therefore, it's almost as if that we ourselves, do not really have control over ourselves. And in order for us to fully develop, it's basically trying to uncover the unconscious thoughts and bring it to life. We also have the evolutionary perspective. The best way to actually explain the evolutionary perspective is about, of course, it's about the idea that it's again, whereby we ourselves is in denial perhaps of the fact that there is actually a hereafter. whatever it is that we do is about the survival within this world solely. So we also have this biopsychological perspective, cognitive perspective, and behavioral perspectives. All of these, they are rather limited. They're limited in their explanation. For example, the behavioral perspective focus on the fact that there's no cognition, there's no internal, there's no unseen aspect. You can only focus on the fact that things that we can actually see what people do. Cognitive perspective basically have a focus expansion on the fact that there's the thinking mind as well that we can look at indeed. Biopsychological perspective basically combine between how there's the human biology, but also of course the other facets of human that we can actually see, like how our neurons, our nervous system itself can be highly influential to what we do on a day-to-day basis, but they're all rather limited actually. The way that they guide eventually, the expansion of knowledge itself is really having a heavy focus on how do we survive in this world and how do we move forward within this world itself. But there's a lot of denial about the soul aspect and how the unseen itself is greater than about the thinking mind. The unseen itself, the relations that we have with the creator and how our purpose as a creation eventually would guide us with what we do, how we think, and eventually allow us to have a full-grown understanding. Within the goals of psychology, if we were to basically expand further, leading us to the discovery of knowledge itself, the goals of psychology, especially research in psychology itself, is to describe what is happening, to explain why is it happening, to predict will it happen again, and to control and manipulate possibilities for change. Integrating that with Islam. So when it comes to it, right? When it comes to the research aspect, for all of those to explain, to predict, to describe, and then to control, manipulate, if we integrate that, basically it's really about us, making sure that despite us wanting to know what the human is, it's not that simple or neither is at that definite version. Eventually, in Islam, research in general is for the purpose of obtaining hidayah, divine guidance. We are here to know the Creator and the purpose of creation. Learning about human beings, how we behave, what we do, etc., can deepen that. But we need to do that with caution. The research methodology itself allows the progress of knowledge, making sure it's the right knowledge. Because sometimes what happens is that whatever has been discovered before, maybe perhaps there are areas for improvements. There might be alternative opinions. And therefore, we need to ensure that the knowledge that we have using the scientific approach itself, making sure that we are uncovering the truth, and especially those that are beneficial to the divine truth. We also need to make sure that we separate knowledge that misguides us and focus knowledge that brings us towards the Siratul Mustaqim itself. We need to ensure that we can differentiate between what is considered as scientific claims and pseudo-scientific claims. For scientific claims, they are actually genuine reason, evidence to support what we perceive as the truth. Whereas for the pseudo-scientific claims, it's basically anything that are rather intuitive, and doesn't have a ground for reason at all. So in the psychology, the scientific approach of knowledge itself, what we do is that we begin with having a question. What should we know? What do we want to know? Do we want to know basically what motivates a person to perform 5 daily prayers? Basically, we want to know, how do we breathe in and out? All right, or perhaps we want to know why do some people have difficulties in managing their mental health while others can. But at the end of the day, the bigger question is that as we develop it, it's basically ultimately to know us as a creation, our purpose, our abilities, the limits that we have, and then also basically our relationship with God itself. So the question should be guided by that. And perhaps based on that, we can basically form a hypothesis itself, making a prediction about, hey, what can we know, what can we predict? Right? What's the possibility? What is basically the limit of this itself? We test out the hypothesis, we draw a conclusion, and then basically we make a report to basically eventually present what is the new knowledge that we can have. To conduct a research in psychology, one of the most important things is that to actually begin with a critical mind. Islam calls us to critically examine all specific information and try to impute a general principle through the process of inductive reasoning, but also deductive reasoning as well. Even in the Quran, it's been mentioned that there are those who listen to what is said and follow the best of it. These are the ones rightly guided by Allah, and these are truly the people of reason itself. And then one of my favorite actually, my favorite lesson, from the Quran is that it's actually from the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam.
وإذ قال إبراهيم لأبيه آزر
So this is actually a very good example of how in regards to the practice of conducting observation, which is part of a natural method of conducting research itself, and the utility of critical mind in conducting research. Now, both the Western perspective and also from the medieval Islam believes that a critical mind is important. And a critical mind is not just for the scholars, actually. A critical mind should be for all and everyone, actually, especially for those who are attempting to reflect and become closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also have the desire to actually find the truth and be within the straight path itself. Now, from the verse itself, one of the beautiful journey is that discovering is of the truth is by finding out the right and wrong actually, and slowly it's actually a process itself. It's a process that actually takes patience. It's a process that actually takes effort. All right, and the effort can be rigor, and the effort can be basically prolong itself, but however, it's about not giving up itself, which is a true trait that needs to be had by those who are basically attempting to discover the truth. So critical thinking has been an approach within the intellectual tradition back in the medieval Islam. One of the methods of critical thinking is known as the methods of doubt itself, or the methods of skeptical mind. It's basically a way to ensure that we constantly reflect on what do we know and what do we practice. Now, in psychology itself, it's about us. How have we been behaving thus far? How have we been thinking? What do we know about us? What do we do? All right, and then it's a constant need of reflection itself. We cannot just accept things wholeheartedly without questioning them. Because if not, basically, it's us driving ourselves to the approach of taqlid itself. Taqlid, as we know, is basically assenting to the beliefs of intellectual authorities. Basically, we assume that whatever knowledge that has been passed on to us, that has been given to us from our ancestors, and anyone that we know, perhaps we've read about, all right, we assume that is the absolute truth itself. But we do not question its epistemic values. We do not question how basically it might require improvement itself. We do not question that, it might not necessarily be the ultimate thing that will be beneficial for us. Even if it's the truth, even if it's right, but if you don't have a deep understanding of it, how can we just follow without actually properly embedding our knowledge about why is it important to us? By Fakhruddin al-Razi himself, he mentioned that, for those of you, especially the seekers of knowledge, for those of you who are basically attempting to further expand ideas, providing input for others, you can't believe any current collection of knowledge out there as adequate for you. Because the truth is that sometimes what happens, especially if it comes from mankind itself, it can contain both good amount of good and bad itself. So therefore, if you rely on it just to acquire certain knowledge, for example, you just attend classes, you just read papers, especially if you read current papers from the Western perspective itself, you won't be among those who are successful. Because on the contrary, the student will definitely aspire to gain great knowledge. The one that is actually trying to seek the truth will be someone who is thirsty, as if he has arrived at a mirage. He becomes perplexed by the idea that there's so many ideas out there. There's so many ways to find them as well. And the fact that he might feel as if he could be despaired from the victory of the correct course. Now, this is actually an extreme view of realizing that maybe it will never be finished. The discovery of knowledge will never be finished. And this is actually a great process itself to humble ourselves and also to realize that if we begin with the mindset that it's always an ongoing journey itself. Whatever it is that we've discovered through the research process that we've conducted, there's always room for improvements itself. So therefore, we might be deprived of the correct course, but doesn't mean that it should ever stop. So in that regard, how do we conduct research? So one of the critical thinking processes is that by basically try to seek and present the truth through the argument process itself. So there are 5 separate methods that has been inspired by the method which Fakhruddin al-Razi himself have tried to discover information and search for knowledge itself. Beginning with the dialectical method. For the dialectical method is the idea that every position of knowledge, every conclusion that you make is as simple as what motivates human, what makes a person sad, what makes a person angry. Do we have the biological truth? Do we have the ultimate truth, etc.? There are 2 sides of the story at least. Each side might be opposing to one another. What is important is that we can't just say there's only one side of the truth immediately. We can't just go ahead and then embrace or put charge ourselves towards just one side because it's comforting to us. We can't just put ourselves in a spot whereby because we feel like this is something that we've always heard. No, it's about presenting both sides, seeing the benefits, the pros and cons, the way each side has to present itself, and then come to a conclusion to see which one actually holds greater or stronger values. But how do we know the values itself? This is the process of critical examination itself. Try to see the premises and reasoning of the argument. Identify whereby if there is any idea, any explanation, any evidences that they include that would be missing, inconsistent, or there's flaws to it. It doesn't make much sense. So that would be the process of critical examination of both sides of the story. Then, of course, to make sure that we are truly critically examining whatever that we found, any information that we found, make sure that we can also utilize the eclectic approach, whereby you make sure that you're not only relying on one sources, you're relying on different sources, different information, different ways of obtaining the knowledge itself. The sources that we can communicate about, I will share after this. And then the next one is the emphasis on reason itself. Whenever there is a position, there's an idea, someone stating that, making a statement, this is the truth. This is what I know. This is what I believe in. This is how I believe it. Like, the importance of sleep for mankind. This is how I know the importance of prayers for man. This is how I know soul actually exists or soul do not exist. What will be the reasoning behind it? There should be a valid explanation for each statement being made when you are trying to present the truth. In the process of research itself, if you're trying to basically present the ultimate truth itself, there should be a line of inquiry, a line of rational thoughts that can basically present this idea that is not just intuitive. There's actually a valid reason with evidences to support it. Then finally, to have the skeptical attitude. The skeptical attitude is not the meaning that whereby you close your mind off of information, but rather you open your mind to alternative interpretation, alternative perspectives, so that you do not cease yourself from discovering the truth, but rather you embark on this journey continuously as if that you realize that you can never be certain that what you have is the absolute certainty, but yet you are always on the discovery period of uncovering the divine and the ultimate truth itself. So as I mentioned just now in regards to how do you find your sources? So this is the methods of research and how they are valuable. Within psychology itself, there are several methods that has been agreed upon and they are commonly utilized and also practiced. All right, so we have what we call as the descriptive methods, the correlations methods, and then the experimental methods. Of course, these are very much technical in nature, and I'm pretty sure some of us have heard it before. Now, regarding the descriptive methods of research in psychology, basically is really about seeing things as is and then making a notation about it. For example, if you want to know how do people deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, how do people actually communicate on a day-to-day basis with someone who is older than them, someone who is younger than them? How do we know a person is Muslim and their practices of Islam itself? Right, under the descriptive methods, we have various other methods alongside with it, such as naturalistic observation, that is SFU. You walk out there, perhaps you go to a mall, you go to a mosque, and then you see people as is how they behave, and you make a notation of it. Now we also have the laboratory observation. This is whereby perhaps you have a designated space within your university, within your own institution. You decide that I'm going to put people here with the hope that I can have a better understanding of them, right? And then after that, we also have basically case studies, survey research. And then besides that, we also have basically the correlations method. All right, this is basically for the expansion, of course, whereby you assume that any human behaviors, they exist together, not just one. For example, if we look into mental health, there has been basically assumptions and also research being done to understand the fact that improvement of mental health does not come about just like that. There are many behaviors out there, of a person that can basically inform how to improve their mental health. For example, such as prayers, communication, and strengthening your relationship with God. And then, of course, finally, experiment is just another method. So these are basically the basic methods in psychology. But how do we integrate this process? When it comes to embarking on a research, right, we can't just take the psychological process on its own, especially from the Western approach itself. To embed the knowledge of Quran and Hadith in the development of this and discovery of knowledge is actually highly important itself. Sorry. One of the approaches that, of course, the scientific research that we've done, the observed behaviors that we basically have done, utilizing basically the Western approach that have been discovered itself, we try to combine them with the records of revelation itself. Now, it is important that we guide ourselves through the records of revelation itself. One of the key approaches that make sure that we basically have a full understanding and then like a deep understanding about the concepts, rules of Islam, the knowledge of the created and the creations itself. There are basic principles in Islam. For example, even within the Maqasid Sharia, whatever it is that we have, for example, the protection of intellect itself, the protection of lineage itself, the protection of wealth itself. You know, all of these are basically important to make sure that whenever we're trying to discover knowledge, it is in line with that. For example, let's talk about the protection of lineage itself. If we were to communicate about the topics of psychology itself nowadays, if we are not guided by the Maqasid Sharia itself, what could happen is that we allow ourselves to conduct research that are completely unethical and discovering the truth that presumably benefits more towards our behaviors and our nature within this world, disregarding the fact that there is actually a divine purpose for us in the hereafter itself. If we actually try to utilize the records of revelation, for example, using the Quran and the Hadith itself, there are many processes that we can do, for example, by using basically excerpts from the Quran. Right? We can begin our research by using excerpts of the Quran to understand things such as ahlak, the fact that there exists our relationship, spiritual relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the idea of critical thinking, your critical mind itself. There are many verses in the Quran that actually spoke of this. What we can do is that we utilize this principle and this knowledge and then integrate it with the approach of psychology itself. That is, for example, you conduct naturalistic observation, perhaps. You conduct survey, perhaps, and query people about this. Ask people about this. How do you experience this? Right? And the approach itself, how do you experience this? You can ask basically through the approach of basic psychological skills. You can also basically ask the approach through interview. And if you were to conduct an observation, just see it. Just see it, how people conduct the the prayer 5 times a day. You see how people actually attend classes and communicate, engage in critical discourses itself, the language that they use, the words that they actually utilize. All of this we can use. So this is basically the natural research methods itself. However, when we embed it with the records of revelation itself, what it does is that it provides us an idea, it provides us principles, it provides us rules whereby whatever it is that we discover, whatever it is that we find out, eventually, number one, it will basically allow us to basically realize that this is the power of the Creator, our purpose as a creation, and basically the rules and limits and that we have in order to make sure that we never go astray itself. Through the integration process, there are many things that we can basically embark on. We will uncover further the importance of akhlaq itself. We will uncover further the importance of tadabbur, prayers, among others. When it comes to it, there are more and more actually Muslim psychologists that have embarked on research such as this because they realize that there are many concepts within the Quran itself that you can actually first use to further observe, basically on our day-to-day experience itself, and then make a scientific discovery of it. The scientific discovery, of course, it has the rigorous process of, like I mentioned just now, basically finding out what is your question. Do you want to understand further? Why is prayer important to our physical health or even our mental health? Why is it important that we maintain akhlaq itself? Without these questions, what could happen is that people will basically live a life whereby there is no law, especially the law that should be guiding you to ensure that whatever it is, there is actually benefit for you, there's benefit for others. And on top of that, there's actually a benefit for your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala yourself. So my final thought on it is that, of course, begin with a critical mind. And then also on top of that, that critical mind should be guided properly, and then, cautiously as well with the records of revelation. We have the Quran and Hadith to guide us on that, making sure that at the end of the day, it's about relying on the Tawhidic paradigm, that is the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and understanding that, under the Tawhidic paradigm, there is Allah, the creator, and we are basically the creation. And then among us as well, there are other things around us that we can engage and actually, interact with, to make sure that we are able to understand fully the psychology, that is the human mind, and also the mental processes and the behaviors itself, that eventually ultimately will be beneficial for us in the hereafter. So that is it actually for my part. Hope we can get started. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Alhamdulillah, it's a very great and very important this this presentation, mashallah. And Doctor, we will open the Q&A. Because I think we can chat in the chat box first, or all participants, you can raise up your hand. If you want to ask the question, you can raise up your hand so that I can unmute you.
There is one question that I saw from Adiyajna Putri. I think this is a good question. I definitely enjoy this. I still do not understand, do research questions in Islamic psychology originate from the Quran and Hadith, which are explained through a psychological point of view, or do they originate from everyday problems which are answered using an Islamic and psychological perspective? When it comes to the emergence of research, so if I can go back to my slide 1 second now, because that's one of the slides. When we're talking about the emergence of the question itself, perceiving the question itself, whether it originates from Quran and Hadith, or do they originate from the everyday problems itself, I believe they are both. You can't deny either one. You do not decide to start, from the Quran. You can. That's not a problem at all. But sometimes what happens is that perhaps you begin with the pondering, who is God? Like Ibrahim alayhi salam started with that. Then he make a realization slowly through the discovery of how he observes the world around him, and eventually from the sun, and then from the people, and then he made it further the development of the critical mind itself, make him realize that the world led him to the Quran and Hadith. Sometimes it's the Quran and Hadith as well lead us to answer the questions of the world itself, and they both should coexist rather than being separated, like one comes first before the other. But what should eventually come to us is basically from the heart itself, that you are actually trying to uncover the truth. This is basically ultimately the thing that is actually missing and in error if you basically separate yourself from the Islamic approaches. I hope that answers the question. How can we differentiate between the Islamic perspective, skepticism, and the Cartesian doubt? I don't think that is necessary. From the Islamic perspective, if I can mention, right, especially in the deeper understanding of the Islamic perspective as well, when it comes to the method of doubt, of course, it is about really making sure that we are open to the idea that there's possibility, there's the truth out there, and we have not have the full understanding, or we might have the wrong understanding itself. All right. So in regards to the Islamic perspective itself, it's about ensuring that the additional part is that whatever it is that we are doubtful about, we have absolute certainty there is one truth. All right. Tawheed is the truth. That is the ultimate difference. All right. I'm reflecting from the perspective, from Nur Saada. I'm reflecting from the perspective of a Muslim minority living in a secular society, Philippines. I wonder, how can we pursue integrative approach to psychology and implement this in our education system? Now, that is actually quite a big question itself. I understand, because I used to live in what I would say, in a community whereby majority of the individuals are non-practicing, And it is indeed a struggle, especially. But like, one of the things that I learned is that to not allow yourself to isolate yourself, especially as a Muslim, the best approach is that to actually live within the community that actually have like, practicing Islam itself. I do think that, that's actually important itself. But at the same time, to integrate technology knowledge, I believe that, there are many opportunities whereby you can actually create your own educational group, all right, to implement this in our education system, and then make it clear within that particular educational group whereby the difference between the absence of Islam as the integration of Islam in the spread of knowledge, and also the presence of it, how different it is, and make it a fruitful effort, a seamless and endless effort to make sure that it's always within the mind, because the moment it is absent and there's no effort to ensure continuity of it, people can go astray. There's the forgetfulness aspect. It's as simple as being in the wrong crowd, actually. I hope that helps. It's a complicated thing. I do feel like that's a long discussion, actually, regarding like how do we actually allow, living in a secular society, especially if you're a Muslim minority. I don't think it's I wouldn't say it's not a problem. I would say it's not impossible. It's been done over and over again. We can see the spread of Islam itself all over the world. So.
MashaAllah. Thank you very much, Doctor. Very interesting. Inshallah, Doctor. Thank you very much, and we will see you again in the next session, Doctor.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for having me. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Shafizan.
Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
All right, yeah. Okay, so I'll just continue.
Yeah. Let me introduce Big. This is our first session for you, Doctor.
Okay, sure, please.
Okay, before Doctor start the session, let me introduce about her brief biodata. That she is Associate Professor Dr. Shafizan Mohamed, complete her BA in Multimedia Management at the Multimedia University, MMU, Malaysia in 2003. Then pursued her MA in Original Communication at the International Islamic University, Malaysia, IIUM, and completed it in 2005. She is currently an associate professor at the Department of Communication, AHAS KIRKHS, IIUM. Her research interests revolve around the effect of new media technologies, which includes online public space and enter the online communicatives and online social movement. Her PhD was on the cultural dimension of online alternative media in Malaysia, focusing mainly on political blockchain. He has present research paper in numerous local and international conferences. Today, we will listen from her the topic regarding contemporary theories in media and communication. Doctor, you have 45 minutes. فليتفضل مأجورة, Doctor.
Okay, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning. First of all, I think I just would like to thank the IIIT as well as AHAS KIRKHS for inviting me to speak this morning. So I have been asked to talk about contemporary theories in media and communication. So starting out, I think it was a challenge for me to try to think of how best to encapsulate theory, especially talking about theory of contemporary, which is supposed to be what is in the present within this 45 minutes time frame. So I have tried to design it the best way I know how. So this is basically what I will be covering today. I will start about talking, to refresh, talking about what is theory and the role of theory in our area of study, which is the social science. contemporary Western communication theories, as well as trying to critique a little bit about what is problematic within the Western communication theory and how Islam and Islamic scholars have contributed to communication theory. So I think before I dive into communication, I would like to take a more broad start talking about what is theory. Especially in scholarship as well as in academia, I think theory has always been somewhat a contested or a misunderstood term, because people in general would like to think that theory is something that is abstract or subjective, that people tend to use the word theory or theorize things when they cannot have specific explanation or when they don't have answers to certain things, and then they theorize. Well, while that is not essentially wrong, I think that would be what we consider as theory in layman terms. Basically looking at theories as just an explanation of certain relationship. I think in our everyday life, we survive by going to theory by theory. For example, I think there is around 99 people here in this Zoom room. And why are we here today? Because we are living by a certain theory. Okay, probably Miss Aisha, Mr. Habib are all here because based on the theory that if we come here, you'll probably get a certificate, but more importantly, you will get knowledge. So the idea of just coming here is also a part of theory. But again, we consider it abstract because although all of us are here, some of us will get more knowledge than others. So this is the abstract part of theory. And also, I think I would like to say that generally, if you're talking about theory, every one of us is a theorist. We can all theorize. And I think the best theorists of all would be for example, I think our mothers lah. All right. Mothers have theories about everything. Okay. For example, I don't know how it is in other cultures because it's very fun to have international group here. But in Malaysia or maybe in Eastern and Asian culture, we have this simple theory that mothers always tell us, which is to wash our feet before we go to sleep. So looks like a very abstract relationship, but mothers would tell us, wash your feet, because if you don't wash your feet, you would go to sleep having nightmares. So this is the problem with theory, layman theory, because people could not make that connections based on this abstract assumption. But although we don't believe our mothers as being theorists, we do believe that what she say has some truth. Maybe have you tried going to sleep with a dirty body and feet? You will not get a good sleep and you might have nightmares, and your mother is correct. So is your mother a theorist? Yes. Was that relationship a theory? Yes, also. It's just that what we are talking about in this context, all right, is trying to break away from these layman theories into what we would consider more scientific theory. So the theories that our mothers have, for example, like I've mentioned just now, going to sleep with washing your feet before going to sleep, it is the layman theory. But can we turn it into a scientific theory, a scholarly theory? Of course we can. But of course, then we're talking about theory that is scientific. And when we're talking about what is contemporary, then we're talking about scientific theories. So what are scientific theories? Theories that are relationships that are supported by methods, evidence, reasoning. Theories that have been tested by thousands and thousands of research studies. So in general, I would say that contemporary theories are mostly grounded in this idea of positivism. So what is this positivism? It is like a philosophical approach that sees scholarship, that sees the world as something that is observable. And that when we talk about knowledge, it has to be something that is material, that is measurable, that is out there. So here we're talking about, contemporary theories. When we mention it as being scientific, it has to be something that is measurable. So this is an important part that I think I would like to highlight, which is to differentiate what is theory in a layman term and theory when we talk about contemporary scholarship. So why is this stress, we call it, why is this focus on scientific, being scientific? All right, as you know that we are here in the area of social science and arts, we're not really looking at what science is doing, okay? But we really still want to take the term science because science is this systematic pursuit of knowledge, you know, about natural and social world through observation and experimentation, okay? What is this recognition towards science? Because science focuses on logical reasoning, evidences, you know, methods. As you know, for example, in social science, maybe in sociology, in history, as well as in communication, what we study is human behaviors. So human behaviors sometimes is not quite measurable, okay? So it is sometimes hard for people that study human behaviors to get acknowledgement. Not like how a scientist, okay, that studies a new innovation or invention gets their acknowledgement. Why do science always get the acknowledgement? Because the scientific process is often trusted. For example, I think when we go to the clinics, right, when we are sick, we trust the doctor because we believe that he has gone through all this scientific process. He has done the experiments, he has gone to school, so we don't question the doctors. Okay, but when we try to talk about assumptions made about human behaviors, okay, about religiosity, about good communication process, it is always something that is abstract. So that is why, okay, when we do research in our areas where in the social sciences, we are very concerned about this term science, that we want to be scientific. Because when we're talking about complex social interactions, okay, it can often sometimes be questionable. So if we are backed by scientific methodology, processes, okay, we follow certain laws and rules when we do the research, it will give us more credibility. So this is how we relate, okay, science, social science, and communication. So what is communication? I think we have already had several lectures on communication before this, but the science of communication is really simple. It is just about transmitting information and how to effectively do it. Okay, so in what we call it in a more formal term, communication is actually how humans convey and receive messages and how these processes impact individuals and societies. So why was there why was there this interest in studying communication? Okay, why did scholars, okay, wanted to theorize, make relationship, to better understand communication processes? Because throughout history, human has discovered, okay, that communication is an essential process to everyday life, to development. And unfortunately, of course, as we know that a lot of our textbooks or our theories, especially in communication, has been Western oriented, where we look at how communication was, how did communication became a scholarly or scholarship area, okay, because according to the Western ideas is that through Western histories, they started to see the importance or to identify the need for effective communication. Okay, what is effective communication? Which is the ability to send the right information to the audiences. So one of the first theory or the way they look at this communication process was through the idea of rhetoric. So rhetoric is the idea of based on Greek civilization. Greek thinkers, Plato and Aristotle, they come up with this idea of rhetoric where they feel that there is an art to persuade. When you use the right way to speak, when you use the right way to express yourself, okay, it will bring different, feedbacks. So when they started to look at this and observe how people communicate and try to introduce the idea of rhetoric, then they started to discover, okay, that communication can actually be designed, that communication can actually be studied. On one hand, here we're talking about communication, okay, which is rather interpersonal, human to human. But as human evolved, all right, and throughout history, we see the development of technology. And within the area of media and communication, we had the rise of the printing press. So if you can see the image here, this is actually the printing press, considered one of the first revolutionary development in media and communication, because it allowed for the publication of books in bulks, which also gave rise to the idea of mass media and mass communication. Historically, when we talk about this idea of rhetoric, it is interpersonal. Interpersonal meaning one to one, but mass meaning one to many or many to many. And suddenly, the what we call it, the transfer of information became expedited. It grew very big, and the rise of mass media, okay, brought in a different impact, a different influence, okay, into human lives, and this further gave more interest or even more significance in the study of media and communication. And when we need to study media and communication, this is also gave rise to the new theories in research. So to get to the contemporary, I think it's also very important for us to get a bit of a historical background. Why do I want to start with Aristotle's communication model? Because this is considered probably one of the earliest, if not the earliest, theories of communication. Like I've mentioned before, humans started to become very interested in this concept of effective communication. So how to better explain it? So Aristotle and his friends at the time, okay, came up with this concept of rhetoric, where he says, with the right communication plan, okay, we can persuade the audience or the listeners. So Aristotle emphasized on three functions in communication, which he has described as ethos, pathos, and logos. According to Aristotle, okay, the message is really the ownership of the speaker, the sender. If the sender has a good credibility and has an emotional appeal and able to present his information or his presentation in a very logical argument, he would be able to engage in what we consider just now as an effective communication. So in no way this Aristotle's model or rhetoric is scientific, because I mentioned just now, right, when we talk about scientific theory, it has to be measured. It has to be what we call it empirical. But what Aristotle did was based on observation. Although this original rhetoric theory is not what we would consider as sophisticated, it laid the ground to studying and theorizing communication. So as people, or I would consider civilizations, communities, and societies grew, okay, and they are become more, familiar with the importance of communication, there were other communication models that were introduced. I think those who study communication would know this is probably the most common model that we start with when we study communication, which is the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. What is interesting is that Shannon and Weaver are actually mathematicians. So the model that they came up with is actually a mathematical model that looks at the transfer of information. But in communication studies, we have adopted this model because it is also relevant to what we study. So what is interesting with this model is actually we could consider it as an improvement as well as a more sophisticated expansion of the rhetorics, because Shannon and Weaver had identified 6 key concepts, which is the sender, encoder, channel, noise, decoder, and receiver. So although I don't have the intention to explain this particular theory in detail, what I really want to show is how it has developed the theory of communication from something that is very simple, like rhetoric, into something that is more sophisticated and better well explained. So what this model has done is that it shows that communication is one way and linear, although now it is criticized for not being inclusive. But what it did was it has given us, those who study communication, a clearer picture, okay, how communication works and process. So if we are able to identify these concepts, we are able to even manipulate the communication process. At the same time, while Shannon and Weaver introduced their model, Harold Laswell, a professor, actually an American political scientist, but also we consider him a communication theorist, came up with a similar model, trying to explain this communication process. But Laswell's theory is rather more, I would say, flexible in terms that it talks about not really a consequential linear process, but he wants to look at the whole more, what we call it, not inclusive, a more detailed way of looking at the process by identifying the concept of who says what, to whom, through which channel, with what effect. So if you can see this model here, okay, it looks almost similar to Shannon and Weaver's, even similar to Aristotle's rhetoric, because it is a linear communication process. Okay, it talks about how the message gets to the receivers. But what is very interesting about Laswell's model is that he highlighted effect. And this is something that is quite important in the study of communication, because all this while scholars were looking at the process, not looking at the effects. What would happen? How can we actually look at what messages do to the people? So initially, Laswell had a political interest because he was more concerned about how media messages affect the recipients of those messages. Obviously, we can see this a lot in the world that we live in today, where political communication with their agendas often use media, often use the communication processes to better influence and even sometimes transmit ideology to the audiences. So while Laswell introduced this model, okay, and the idea of effects then further bring into, I think it basically developed the communication discipline, because then people started to look at effects and don't just look at the process, and they started to talk about the ideas of advertising, public relations. So these are all basically part of the media and communication field, where they are starting to look at communication as beyond sending just interpersonal communication. So fast forward today, in the old times, not really old, but in recent times, when we talk about Laswell or when we talk about Shannon and Weaver, the focus is really on human communication. But in contemporary times, the way that we live today, obviously, when we talk about communication, it is beyond human interactions. Now we also include machines, include things in the communication process. So when we talk about what is contemporary, then we have to acknowledge that the communication process has really grown and it has become more complicated. No longer direct sender to receiver. For example, as you can see this model, the internet model of communication, when we talk about the users, okay, and when we talk about the source of the message, it's no longer organizations or just individuals. It could be both at the same time. And that whoever is the source are also the receivers. So it's rather complicated. Because now when we talk about communication, we're no longer talking about one-way direction. Okay? It is really about multi-directional communication. And this process is not what we call it staggered, it is real-time. You are sending and receiving messages. So we're talking about networks now, okay? And we're no longer confined to the straight, like I've mentioned just now, sender-receiver relationship. And communication is no longer confined by time and space, but it is now global. And instant communication has allowed us to go against not just geographical, but even a spatial challenges.
Yes, yes.
Yes, thank you. I'm happy with your agreement to that. And now we're even talking about Internet of Things, We're not just talking about human interactions with one another. We're talking about human interacting with things, and things are interacting with things. And what do we mean by things are interacting with things? Because of the rise of this technology, okay, we sometimes have even what we call it, skipped the human interactions where the devices, where the machines are now interacting with one another. When we talk about the Internet of Things communication model, we have device-to-device communication, device-to-cloud communication. So what is this? This is actually to tell us that everything in this world is no longer just human. Things, buildings, systems are all connected and communicating with one another. So that is why today, for example, when we talk about the Internet of Things, one of the best example is the concept of the smart home. I'm sure many of us here today already have a smart home where we no longer have to be at home to switch on the television, or we no longer have to be at home to vacuum our floors, because we can connect that all to our devices. So this, I would say, what I am trying to tell you from the idea of rhetoric to the idea of this Internet of Things is the development of the communication process and how we theorize communication. Communication from something that is simple, as if sending information, into something that is more complicated, more inclusive, talking not just about sending information from one person to another, but sending a message from one system to another system. How one man or one person is no longer just connected to another person, but also connected to a certain system, connected to his house, connected to his cars. So when we talk about what is contemporary, then this is contemporary. Communication, okay, has become very technologically oriented, and communication has become rather complex. And so this is something that theorists have to continuously adapt. So having said that, I would like to make a little jump. So I hope I've been able to discuss what is contemporary. And yes, the models that I have shared with you just now is obviously very Western models, because it is essentially just trying to explain a process. But when we talk about theories, like I've mentioned in the first slide, we're talking about human behaviors. We're also talking about how to probably even solve certain human problems. And when we talk about things that human, they're not really always mechanical. And this is, I think, one of the main issues when we talk about Western theories, because many Western communication theories, like the one that I have just listed just now, are very individualistic. What do I mean by individualistic? If you go back to the theories of rhetoric, it focuses on how a person can influence. Okay, and what is the process to come up with the best knowledge? So when it is individualistic, sometimes it does not help serve social issues. Okay, because we are essentially humans that live with one another. And I think one of the other main problem with Western theories is the concept of value neutral. What do we mean value neutral? I hope you can just go back and remember a little bit when I talk about science, when I talked about positivism. When we look at these theories, Western theories, they tend to look at the world that we live in as something that is observable, that is material. And they will only be able to study what is up to their intellectual ability. And because of this, they tend to overlook things that are spiritual, ethical, what are the collective experience. And these are basically the experiences of many non-Western and religious societies. So I would say then, if we are only focused on the Western theories, more specifically communication theories, we are going to be rather exclusive of other experiences. Because if we think that everything must only be measurable, then it can lead to things that are simplified. And one of the, I think, challenges of Western theories and being positivist, value neutral, is that objectivity most of the time can be secular, and objectivity actually takes you away from taking a stand or making the right decisions. And all of this concept of being neutral cannot be applied in contemporary times, especially because we talk about media, mass media, internet, where the transfer of information not only comes through messages, but through culture, and brings it with so many other issues such as ideology, such as domination, such as even colonialism. So these are theories that positivist Western communication theories, either it was unintentionally designed or they probably intentionally do not want to address this kind of issues. And this gave rise to the idea of critical theory, also not really an Islamic theory, but critical theory would probably break away from Western American theories. So what is critical theory? As the name suggests, these are theories that ask questions, that it is not neutral. So this critical theory became rather prominent in the 1960s because it was popularized by German scholars inspired by Marxism, not really entirely talking about communism. So Marxism is really an approach that questions this concept of capitalism. It talks about the what we call it challenges of power relations. So in critical theory, it is like trying to respond to the weaknesses of what we have discussed just now, all of these models of all of these positivist theories, because critical theories try to question the bigger picture. For example, when we talk about mass media and we will talk about effects, it's not just about trying to get the most effective process and getting the right response. It is more concerned with bigger issues, such as justice, such as what we call it, domination, like I've mentioned just now. And critical theory really did essentially became very prominent as a response to the American and the Western media domination. As we know, or as we experience today, okay, the media that we mostly consume are American. So with this content that is not inclusive and can be rather racist and discriminatory, okay, how can we question? How can we challenge it? So critical theory suggests that we need to be more, to shift the communication studies. We cannot be objective. We cannot be just looking at things that are measurable, because some human effects are qualitative that needs to be interpreted. So there is always an emphasis on the political and cultural dimensions of media and communication. So in critical theory, they always talk about the concept of power relations or the concept of status quo, where they essentially believe, especially in relations to media and communication, that media is a tool that is being used by some power or by someone to maintain their status quo, to basically force on their power to some other groups of people. So some example of theories under this critical theory umbrella is post-colonial theory, Orientalism, feminist theories. Maybe some of you are familiar with the idea of Orientalism that was popularized by Edward Said, where he mentioned that a lot of the media context on the way that basically how we see the world today, or maybe if we look at the context of the Muslim societies, where we sometimes feel inferior to the West, is because of how the media has basically uphold the Western status quo, or how the Americans, for example, through their ownership of the media, okay, has designed, okay, how we, the rest of the world, see their superiority. So so I would say that these are examples of critical theory, which is, like I said, a response to this idea of Western positivism. And I would like to bring this us to the idea of these Islamic contributions. It's not that there is a gap between this development of communication theories where I just mentioned about positivism and critical theory. Why I actually look at that first was to show how Western theories, okay, in its attempt to be scientific, in its attempt to be sophisticated, has moved toward a very narrow understanding of human behaviors. Okay, the Western theories, like all the models that I have showed you just now, they focus on the impact of communication. Okay, what is beneficial to the individuals. And then critical theory then tried to explain this, but only focusing on the idea of power, only concerned with the idea of who is dominating who. What is lack probably in these Western theories, and I would say that critical theory is also essentially Western, okay, has often overlooked the contributions of other civilizations, including Islamic scholars, because Islamic scholars have long recognized the idea of ethical dimensions in communication and emphasized accountability. So this is, I think, the main, what is lack with Western theories, the ethical dimensions and accountability. Where Western theories would like to just describe, to explain, but not put responsibility on anyone, not the source, not the receiver. And this is something that is problematic because, like we mentioned, right, we're talking about human behaviors. So Islamic perspective highlights on the idea of ethics. And what is contemporary? Contemporary times, as we probably know, not just in communication, but through social science, there is this more and more interest, importance placed on the concept of ethics. So of course, we know in the Quran, there has been many verses that talks about the issues of the importance of ethical behaviors, right? Especially when we are communicating. For example, in the Surah Al-Kahf, where Allah says, not a word does he utter except that there is no an observer with him ready to record. So this is a concept, okay, that is probably incomprehensible by the West. A concept that is beyond what is material. A concept that, you know, when you communicate, that when you do something, it is beyond human interaction, that there is a bigger power that is holding you accountable. But if we have this idea of accountability, being responsible not only to what is material to you, then this can bring, I think, human civilization in general, okay, to a more ethical process of communication. And just like many other presenters before me, when we talk about Islamic contributions, okay, and the importance of the Islamic methods or theories, the key concept definitely would be rooted in the idea of Tawheed, the oneness of God. So this idea of this oneness of God, okay, the idea that there is a power that is bigger, okay, would basically govern, okay, a more inclusive theoretical process. Where in Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned, oh, you who believed, fear Allah and speak only words of appropriate justice. So this concept of justice, credibility, okay, ethics was basically not considered important by the West in the old days. But when we fast forward today, that as you can see with the rise of misinformation, miscommunication, okay, the West have been talking about issues of ethics, about responsibility, about accountability, as if they just realize that these are all important components. While in Islam, we know that this is not just an Islamic important component, that in the Islamic communication, these are the building blocks. So I would say that the main contribution, okay, of Islam in the communication theory is the emphasis on ethics, virtues, and moral responsibilities. So these are probably things that are considered abstract within this Western scholarship. And actually, in Islam, we have our own communication theorists, although they have not really been acknowledged as communication theories per se, but I think this is probably one of the interesting thing about Muslim scholarship, Muslim scholars. They are automatically scientists and social scientists. For example, Ibn Khaldun have essentially been very, has stressed from the start about the importance of communication in building social cohesion. Okay, he theorized the concept of asabiyah, social cohesion, where he related communication and the building of strong community and the building of what we call it, strong civilization. So he sees communication as a building block, but this communication process is not individualistic. It is divine, it is collective. So it is a communication here is theorized in a way that is rather different from how the West have theorized it. So in 2007, a communication scholar, Hamid Maulana, did try to come up with a Islamic communication model. So as you can see in this diagram that I have shared with you, okay, so Maulana tried to integrate, okay, these Western ideas that would probably be seen as more systematic to a more realistic, okay, and a more divine communication process that goes beyond what is only humanistic. So Hamid Maulana has basically included all of this concept of Tawheed, Ummah, okay, as we know, Amar Ma'ruf, Nahi Munkar, Adil, Amanah, Shura, and Hikmah within this communication model, where we still highlight the importance of sender, receiver, message, okay, and the basic communication components. But all of these components are guided, okay, by concepts that are more inclusive and more realistic to the human needs, okay, and also able to include the importance of the concept of ethics and moral with the idea of Amar Ma'ruf Nahi Munkar, Adil, Amanah, Shura, and Hikmah. So due to the time limitations that I have, I think I will go faster. And if you have any questions, you can ask later. I think when we talk about contemporary theories, and if we want to narrow down into communication theories, I would say that there is definitely a Western bias, that when we look at media, when we look at communication, we're always taking this Western paradigm that at one point probably worked well, but now when we are living in a more globalized world, okay, the models or theories that are introduced by the West is not inclusive. And it is not able to answer all of human problems because it is essentially very mechanistic. So this brings us to the importance of this Tawhidic epistemology, talking about moral, ethics, accountability, something that is beyond what the West sees as normal process. And there needs to be a collective well-being, that when we talk about media and communication, that is not just about sending information, but a more collective goal. And I think in light of these Western theories being challenged, or Western civilization today as we see it are becoming less and less relevant, so it is time, I think, that Islamic frameworks provide more holistic, ethical and community focused perspective. Because inclusive theories that integrate diverse worldviews, Islamic, and even if it's not Islamic, are essential to address changing global needs, so that in general we can move towards a more balanced, ethical communication practices. So I think I would stop here, and I hope that my presentation has benefited all of you, and I thank you very much for your attention, and I apologize for any mistakes that I may have unintentionally did. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you very much, Dr. The class very interesting, mashallah. And Dr. we open for the Q&A, Dr. Yeah?
Okay, sure. Yeah, can I
For all
just
participants, you can raise up your hand. Yes, yes. Yeah. From the chat box, Dr. There is question in the chat box.
Okay. So there's a few questions I would ask, for example, from Sister Nur Saada that talk about, is technology really value neutral? If we're really taking from the context of the Western positivist overview, they would say that it is value neutral. But through our own, what we call it, experience, as we can see in the world that we live in today, definitely the technology is not value neutral. Actually, there is also a theory called what we call it, the technological determinism, that talks about how technology has basically been used to change human actions and everything about the human civilization. And they do this through the distribution of culture, values through technology. And I think one of the best example is how we use our social media. For example, if you are on Instagram, how can we say that Instagram does not have value? Okay, Instagram pushes us to share, to be visual, okay, to show only what is best, or to curate a certain personality that sometimes is not our natural personality. So that in itself is value. So every medium, I would say, has values. Yeah. Do I have any other questions? Comment on the creation of AI and fake news, and when we are not able. Yes, I agree. The problem with AI, of course, AI also brings benefits. One of the main issue is accountability. Also, this is what I think I would like to discuss just now when we talk about how Islamic contribution to the theories would highlight on this concept of accountability, on morality, because as you know that AI and new technologies is very hard for us to govern or to put it within certain legal jurisdictions. So we need to really rely on literacy, on telling people on what is the best way to mitigate these issues, or to deal with the idea of AI and fake news, misinformation, disinformation. And I think this concept of tawhid, concept of, being fearful of something that is bigger than us, is something that, while some people would say as abstract, it can really be powerful in equipping society in general in dealing with this onslaught of AI and fake news. Yes. Can there be instances where weaponizing or taking advantages of the ignorance of the masses to communication and rhetorical speech be ethical? I hope I'm getting the question correct, but if we are starting the statement by saying weaponizing or taking advantage, obviously there is going to be some ethical contradictions there. But of course, to achieve certain goals, and if we're taking the rhetorical perspective, okay, we're really talking about the process of getting into effective communication. But if this process of effective communication is going to bring us into the idea of colonialism, what we call it, control, then definitely it will not be ethical. Yeah. Okay. Do I have time? Maybe I'll just answer one more question here from Adidiran that asks, why is it that the ideas of accountability was not thought through? I wouldn't say that it was not thought through. And I am assuming that, we are talking about contemporary times, the way that and when I mention we, communication scholars in general, Muslim and non-Muslim, has been relying on the Western ideas that have only recently talked about accountability and ethics and morality. There is obviously a bigger reasons to this. For example, when we talk about Western theories, which, as I have mentioned, are rather individualistic, are value neutral. So there is essentially a more ideological reasons to why they are being we call it individualistic. okay, being value neutral, because this process essentially helps them maintain their own status quo in the sense that it does not promote the context of questioning, of putting responsibility, and this allows the West especially to continuously do or engage in whatever practices that that benefits them. So that is why this idea of accountability was not really highlighted. And it is now become more prominent in recent times, I think, due also to the idea of this globalization, when non-Western groups, non-Western scholars, non-Western practitioners are demanding a different way, okay, and how, for example, post-colonial states are demanding, okay, their colonial powers to be accountable and responsible. So I think that this is one of the reasons why it was not, accountability was not being mainstreamed, and why it is only now that it is becoming more prominent. Okay. Okay, last one, I think, from Sulaiman. Don't you see that Islamic perspective you are talking is positioning itself as passive and defensive instead of being proactive and attacking in terms of contribution counter times? Okay. Oh, Sulaiman, your question is rather challenging. I think in my own personal experience, I'm not trying to position the Islamic perspective as being passive or defensive. I guess it would be rather hard for me to conceptualize the whole idea of presenting an Islamic, what we call it, theories or Islamic worldview, and adapting it, not just adapting it, to explain it in relation to the Western theories within these 45 minutes. But I would say that what I am trying to say here is that the Islamic perspective has offered a very, what we call it, wide, okay, overview of communication process in general. And that for the longest time, it has talked about morality, it has talked about accountability, okay, and ethical practice. So these are all ideas, okay, or values that were not being put forth, okay, in mainstream theories, okay, especially in communication. Okay, and now since that we have more Islamic scholars in the mainstream, okay, we are trying to reflect back and take all of these concepts that have always been prevalent and try to I think be proactive, okay, by guiding, okay, this Western perspective that has always been rather biased. And I wouldn't say that Islamic perspective should be attacking, okay? We should be probably not just contributing, but also in the context of contemporary times, probably even remedy, okay, a lot of these issues or problems that have been brought by the very narrow and sometimes biased Western communication theories. Yes, I think that is it. Did I miss anything? If you are interested to know more, maybe you can just email me, or we can, email would be good. Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam, Doctor. Thank you very much, Doctor, for the very interesting sharing today, mashallah. And I hope the participant can grab that knowledge and benefitful from that. Thank you very much, Doctor. Inshallah, we can hope to see you again in the next, inshallah.
Thank you.
And to all participants, we have past 10 minutes, but we have break now, and we will start at the 11, inshallah. We break about 20 minutes, yeah? We will come back at 11, inshallah. Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum, Doktor.
Waalaikumsalam. Am I audible?
Yeah, Doktor. Sorry, Doctor, because just now I'm checked, it's not appear. I think just last week also happened like this.
Okay. No problem. My
Good afternoon,
my
Doctor.
slides are visible?
Yes. It
Okay.
appear now.
Okay.
Assalamualaikum to all participants. Alhamdulillah, welcoming back for the second session, and to starting with the new lectures today with Dr. Zacky Fouz. So we will listen from him the topic regarding the classical Western political philosophy, history, and evolution. Without further ado, Doctor, فليتفضل مأجورا.
Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. نحمده ونصلي على رسول الكريم أما بعد. Thank you very much, Sister MC. And so today I think this is the 5th time we are meeting through this certificate course, and so now gradually moving towards more contemporary topics. And in the last week, actually, we discussed classical Islamic political theory, and in that lecture we actually covered many aspects of the history of Islamic political thought, mainly focusing mainly on two important thinkers in the Islamic history. One is Imam al-Mawardi, who represented the mainstream Sunni political theory as we identify it, and his work Ahkam Sultaniya. And we discuss the principles of Sunni political theory, and what are the epistemological and ethical roots of that Sunni political theory. And in contrast, we also discuss Al-Farabi's political thought, and we identified it, or we projected, or at least tried to understand it as a rationalist tradition in Islamic history. And also we also discuss the fundamental epistemological ethical principles that Farabi followed in constructing his political philosophy. And finally, actually, as I remember, we actually discussed that Sunni political theory is more closer to the vision of democracy compared to the rationalist tradition of Farabi, when we evaluate both of those traditions in light of contemporary developments. Today, we are discussing counterpart to the Islamic tradition in the medieval world, which is classical Western political philosophy, history, and its evolution. So it's in this theme, actually, within 35 to 40 minutes, I am trying to cover almost 10 to 15 centuries of developments in political thought. So we are moving, I think in this presentation, I am trying to cover 3 different historical periods: the ancient political thought, and the early medieval political thought, and the late medieval political thought. And I will be in the final few minutes, I'll be touching the evolution of modern political theory as well. So it's a long journey in this presentation that we are going to undertake. And so I wish that I could explain the ideas more explicitly and clearly, inshallah. So these are the three important aspects or major dimensions that we are going to discuss today. The Greek political thought, I'll be focusing on Plato and Aristotle. Then I move to the classical Christian political thought, where I will focus on Saint Augustine and Saint Thomas Aquinas. And then religious reformation and its impact on political thought, I'll be focusing on Martin Luther. So this is a long journey. I will try my maximum to summarize the ideas of these three important phases of Islamic political intellectual history. And so initially the Greek political thought, Plato and Aristotle, you know, when we discussing about political philosophy and its history, we always consider Plato and Aristotle as the fathers of political philosophy in general. When we read the textbooks that is written in the Western context, or the mainstream political philosophy subjects actually start with Plato and Aristotle. So following that tradition, we are also starting here, though we have some criticisms toward that classification. So initially, the political philosophy systematized in the Greek context, and the works and books exclusively written discussing politics within that historical period. That is the argument actually scholars make when they consider Plato and Aristotle to be the fathers of modern political philosophy, because they argue both of the scholars are the first people who actually theorize politics as a separate sphere of human life compared to other aspects like economy, society, education. So the politics separated, and it was exclusively focused first by the Plato and Aristotle. So they are being considered, according to their argument, as the fathers of political philosophy. So if we focus on the context of emergence of political philosophy in the Greek, actually in that period, a community of scholars, or at least speakers in the name of sophist, came into took the center stage, and they actually emerged to respond to the challenge of instability which was prevailing at the time because of the Persian invasions and attack on the Greek city-states. So there were an instability in the Greek states. So that instability or instability led to the many intellectual confusions. So sophists are actually were results of such instabilities. Sophists, like similar to postmodernists today, and they actually promoted moral relativism, saying that there is no any objective values, no any objective epistemological principles. Rather, the values and morality and knowledge are relative and subjective. And they also promoted a particular discourse of politics, saying that politics is all about power. So actually, Plato and Aristotle, both were philosophers, try to respond to sophist arguments and provide an objective, stable, ethical and moral and political vision for the Greek society. So initially, both Aristotle and Plato defined human nature as basically as rational, and also human nature as ethical, and both human beings are political by nature. So this definition actually provided shared both Plato and Aristotle. This definition is is one of the agreements among Plato and Aristotle at the time. So once they both defined human nature as rational and ethical and also political, and this led them to define human developments as an ethical development. So they actually synonymously use both rational and ethical, mean if the basic human essence is rational, then developing that rational faculty is the ethical and the basis of ethics. So as much as to act, your ethicality decided by your capacity to rational capacity. And so this both Plato and Aristotle provided a framework for ethical development based on the human rational capacity. So, and also another important contribution to political philosophy by the Plato and Aristotle is that both argued that political condition is fundamental to ethical and rational development. So they argued that politics is there just to empower and strengthen the ethical and rational capacity of human beings. So, to put it otherwise, both Aristotle and Plato argued that purpose of politics is educational. It's not just material development. It is not just providing luxury lifestyles. Rather, as we conceive politics today in the modern context, rather both Plato and Aristotle argued that politics is fundamentally about ethical and rational development of human being and moral development of human being. So because without politics, even they argued, without involvement in politics, a human being cannot become a fully matured person, fully ethical person. Actually, if you don't have an involvement in politics, meaning to say you are either God or either an animal, meaning to say that if you are a human being, you should involve in politics, because politics is partly educational. So meaning it means that politics is there just to develop institutions that help people to achieve their moral objectives. So they actually related politics and morality into a single framework, unless the politics is as in contrast to today's conception of politics. So Plato and Aristotle provided sort of provided a purpose to politics and connected that politics with ethical and moral development. In this sense, Plato's solution, how that politics can be actually institutionalized to achieve moral objectives. Plato proposed a more radical option, which we call philosopher king model. And so you can read in the materials anywhere in the online, something like that, because I don't have time to go into that detail. But about the philosopher king model, but he provided that philosopher needs to become a king so that he will be able to, so the city and the people will be guided by true ethical and rational instructions coming from the philosopher, the person who have achieved highest level of rationality. He is the philosopher according to the Plato. But Aristotle provided a more realist political alternative, and he embraced a mixed constitution, meaning to say that he provided a political model there where almost all the segments of the community, there will be wealthy people, rich people, poor people, and also there will be educated people. And so a community has many many segments of people with many classes. So Aristotle's model is somewhat incorporating all those elements into a single frame. And so he was a more realist in terms of providing his political alternative. Anyhow, what we need to understand in the Greek period, that Plato and Aristotle connected politics with purposes, connected politics with moral development and rational development and ethical development. This is very, very important to take into account when we discussing the history and evolution of political philosophy. And then we move to the classical period, classical Christian political thoughts in Augustine, the rise of theocracy. You see with the emergence of Christianity in Europe, you see the whole Christianization of Europe. Europe has become very Christianized, and Constantine the Great actually captured the power, and he embraced Christianity, and he announced that his kingdom will be, his power will be instrumentalized to spread and consolidate Christianity. So Constantine the Great actually merged the state and the church for the first time. And so after the fall of Constantine, the Europe encountered severe disintegration. So communities become fragmented. During that the period of decline, the churches started to rise into power and actually captured the power in many European regions. And so since communities are fragmented, churches started to provide stability, started to organize society. This happened in 4th and 5th centuries, actually 3rd and 4th centuries after the Christ. So in that context, we see the emergence of Saint Augustine, who actually started to theorize the political role of the church, because in his time, church were increasingly becoming dominant, providing stability and protecting communities from further fragmentation. And so he wrote a very important book, which we still read in political philosophy classes. Actually, The City of God. In that City of God, he actually provided a vision how church can become an institution that provides stability, political vision, and in direction for the Christian communities in the Europe. In that book, he actually provided, in that and some other books that he wrote, he actually provided different political vision compared to what we saw in Greek period, where Saint Augustine actually defined human being as sinful by nature, following the Christian theology. And so you see that in Greek period, Plato and Aristotle actually saw human being as rational and has the potential to become ethical, and human being is purposive. But here he reversed all those Greek political or Greek philosophical ideas, and medieval Christian Saint Augustine provided a different picture, which is rather a negative picture about human being. He said human beings are actually sinful by nature, and so the church's main duty is to serve that sinful person and to liberate and all Christian. So if church duty is to serve sinful person, all Christians should take part a membership in church, and Christians should assist and participate in church affairs. So he actually, for the first time, Saint Augustine theorized the role of church as important as politics. So the real main institution, according to Saint Augustine, is church. So church is the only institution is going to serve human being from their sinful nature. So he actually emphasized and give much priority to the church, and he argued in the City of God that church is the only institution that has the potential to provide liberation for human being. So if he considered human nature being sinful and church duty is to serve people from those sinful nature, and in order to do that, all Christians should take part in the church activities. So if so, how did St. Augustine consider politics? So according to St. Augustine, political institutions are just ensuring peace in a sinful world. The world is full of sinfulness because the people are fundamentally by nature sinful. They are fallen people. They did mistake in the paradise, so God has thrown themselves, thrown into this world as a punishment. So the people fundamentally here are here to do sinful acts. So political institutions are just there to ensure peace from in the sinful world. Sinful man cannot liberate himself through politics. So politics is very, very instrumental just to provide stability in this world. But politics cannot actually liberate people from their sinful nature. Real liberation is a liberation from the sin. So that is only in the heaven. In order to achieve that end, you need to attach to church. You need to work for church. So church is above politics. Politics is just instrumental to maintain the political stability in this world. But real liberation is from the sin, and it can only be achieved in the heaven. Only way to achieve is to attach yourself with the church. So actually you can see here that St. Augustine actually degraded the importance of politics in human life and placed church in the role in a place which is above than the politics. Politics is just an institution just going to provide stability. Church is the real spiritual institution that you need to attach yourself. And so this is a very contrasting picture compared to the Aristotle and Plato, because Aristotle and Plato, as I explained to you, that they considered human being as rational, and your rationality can be developed and empowered through developing political institutions. So politics is part of human development according to Plato and Aristotle. But here he separated both. Politics is just a material thing. It's just try to provide peace in this sinful world. But real liberation can come only through church. You need to attach yourself with the church, because church is the only institution that can guide you to reach the heaven. So here Augustine actually degraded the role of politics and separated politics from the spirituality. This is how the separation between the church and the politics started to emerge. And on state, St. Augustine argued the politics is all about lack of virtue, where hypocrisy and killing and manipulations are happening. The nature of the politics is just killing, manipulation, corruption. Why those are happening in politics? Because politics is a worldly thing. That actually God has created politics as a punishment to human beings' initial sin. The politics is a punishment, because that's why it's almost corrupted, manipulative. And so what we can achieve in politics maximum is just to protect peace, stability. So we can use law and power to control people from killing each other. That's the maximum extent that we can go. But we cannot avoid that politics is we cannot actually clean the politics from corruption, because corruption and politics and manipulation are embedded. That is how God has created politics, and it's a punishment for human being. So even we achieve sort of a peace, kind of a peace in this world, St. Augustine argues, that peace is not perfect peace. Worldly peace is just controlling the violence. But if you want a perfect peace, that peace can only be achieved in the heaven, not in this world. So we need to target, we need to reorient our perception towards the heaven and achieving the true peace there. So only way to achieve the true peace is church. So the world state is providing a peace in this world. It is a relative peace. So what we should aspire to, it's a true peace, not the relative peace that state provides. The true peace is in the heaven. The church is the only institution that can guide us. So logically, St. Augustine argued that church is superior to the state. So everyone should help church to empower church in their capacity. So if everyone should have to help church, to empower church, to provide people or to guide people to reach heaven, then it is everyone's duty. So king also member of a community and member of a church. So hence he should use his power to empower the church. When you say though, you can see here the irony that though St. Augustine hated politics because it's a material thing and it's only provides stability in this world, not it doesn't guide us to go to heaven, but implicitly he actually says that since king also a Christian, everybody should help their church in their capacity. So king should support in his capacity to the church. So this is how he actually, though hated politics, he implicitly behind the door, behind the screen, he actually got this. He actually argued or theorized that the state should come under the control of the church, because since church is higher and above, state is lower in terms of their significance. So above, you know, the in the hierarchy, church is on the top, state is on in the comes next to the church. So logically, St. Augustine argued that state needs to be controlled by the church. This is how the Christian theocracy developed and theorized by the St. Augustine. So though St. Augustine provided a different picture than compared to the Christian theology, Greek theology, Greek philosophers. Here I just, in the first note, I just share a few disagreements between Greek philosophy and medieval Christian theology. Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, actually their political philosophy was more focused on this world, but St. Augustine and the medieval Christian theology more focused on the other world, heaven. So they rejected the role of politics, rejected the material world, focusing only the other world, heaven. Greeks were more focused on this world. They believed that happiness can be achieved in this world through even involving in politics. Excuse me. Then the second important contrast is that Plato and Aristotle actually focused on human happiness can be achieved, but medieval Christian theology, as it is developed by St. Augustine, he projected that humans are basically sinful. For that reason, humans cannot achieve happiness in this world. He can only achieve happiness in the heaven. And you see, the Plato and Aristotle more emphasized on reason, while Christian theologian like St. Augustine more emphasized on revelation. And Aristotle and Plato emphasized on the role of state in human empowerment, role of politics in human empowerment, ethical moral development. In contrast to that, medieval Christianity, actually, especially St. Augustine, emphasized the importance of church. Church is the important institution because church is the only institution that brings human being closer to God. Politics is a punishment. Politics is a material thing. It's always power, controlling, manipulation, killing. So politics is not going to bring us to the God. Only church going to bring us to the God, closer to the God. So in this comparison, St. Augustine concluded that church is more important than the state, and church is on the top of the hierarchy and state comes after that. So since in the hierarchy state comes after the church in terms of spiritual significance, church has the authority to control the state. This is how logically St. Augustine developed the medieval Christian theocracy. And then after St. Augustine, the second most important political philosopher in the medieval Christian history is St. Thomas Aquinas. I think this name is quite famous. And as opposed to St. Augustine, St. Thomas Aquinas developed a very critical rereading of Christian philosophy and especially political philosophy. And he actually tried to reconcile the Greek tradition and the Christian fundamentals. So he tried to reconcile both, as we saw some Ibn Rushd did in Islamic history. And so we see the similar project was undertaken by this Thomas Aquinas in Christian history. So he actually argued nature is purposive, so God is manifesting in the nature through his creations, showing his power. And he actually argued achieving goodness and happiness in this life is possible. And it is, though he said that the sinfulness of the human nature and achieving happiness in this world are two different things. So he actually tried to bring goodness and sinfulness into a reconciled position. And Thomas Aquinas argued the world is governed by divine reason and revelation complements reason. And so he argued revelation is going to guide us to how to achieve. Revelation is all about in Thomas Aquinas' vision. It's about revelation is mostly talks about the other world, and reason is God has blessed us with the reason to manage this world. So he tried to reconcile reason and revelation as complementary through this argument. And in politics, he actually, unlike St. Augustine, Thomas Aquinas argued government emerged not because of an original sin, but human being is a social animal. In this case, he's just following the Aristotelian definition of human being. And he argued the human beings are naturally good. So because of our natural goodness and tendencies, we try to organize ourselves through states. You see, St. Augustine promoted a different picture, says that state and politics is a punishment to the sinfulness of the human being. It's a God's punishment. But here, Thomas Aquinas revised that stance, arguing that politics is part of our goodness, that human beings are good and like to work collective way and like to organize our social life to achieve our common interests. So those good tendencies actually pave the way for human beings to involve in politics. So if we rule, if our rule is right and just, and so rule is right and just when directed towards people's good, and bad when directed solely at the ruler's self-interest. So he argued that, anyway, though he revised the role of politics, Thomas Aquinas, he said politics is not as bad as St. Augustine portrayed it. Politics is actually doing a good thing by bringing people together and involving in some common shared interest. So that can make people's life easy. So politics actually has a good positive aspects according to Aquinas. But still he actually believed the church is superior to the state. He did not challenge that idea which was developed by the St. Augustine in the 3rd, 4th centuries. Though he revised the perspective of politics, he actually developed some positive outlook about politics compared to St. Augustine. He did not actually do that. He did not actually develop a positive or at least criticize the church role compared to the politics. He actually accepted that mainstream position. And so we after St. Augustine, the most important figure in the Christian political philosophy is Martin Luther, and he actually is famous for religious reformation, and his impact on political thought is immense. And when it comes to the Martin Luther, he actually in 14th and 15th centuries, he lived there, and he actually paved the way for the development of modern secularism in the West. Though he is a very religious person, his reformation and his ideas eventually led to the development of secularism in the modern context. Martin Luther also believed that man is basically sinful, and revelation can only help people to seek salvation, and faith matters, not actions. All Christians are here. The main contribution of Martin Luther is he just questioned the role and dominance of the church in interpreting the Bible. He said, meaning of the Bible is accessible to all, unlike medieval Christianity, which actually promoted the idea that Bible and interpretation of the Bible is only exclusively the right of the church. So church has the right to interpret and teach Bible to all. So through that traditional institution, people should learn the Bible. But Martin Luther actually deconstructed that narrative and said that all Christians are praised, and meaning of the revelation in the Bible is accessible to all. So we don't need to rely on church to understand Bible or to get our salvation. Rather, people can directly connect themselves to the revelation, meaning to say in their Bible. And so we want church just to manage our religious activities. Church shouldn't argue that they are the only means to only institution that provide heaven, guide the people to reach heaven. Rather, to reach heaven and to become closer to God is our personal relationship with the God. Not that cannot be dictated by the church. So church is just an institution to manage the religious activities. And how to understand Bible in that sense, every Christian has the right to understand, and they have the capacity to understand. So we don't need church as intermediaries to provide us meanings and guidance. So he totally deconstructed the relationship of the Christian community with the church, and also he actually deconstructed the importance of priestly class to interpret the Bible. And so he argued that in that sense, logically, he concluded the church is not above the state, and both state and church are two institutions, perform two different duties. Politics manage the worldly affairs, church manage the religious affairs. So nothing connected to divinity. And so then again, he eventually said that we need to obey the state in all circumstances. All of this deconstruction process led to the civil war between the different European theological denominations. So eventually that led to the civil war. And so because of that civil war, one of the unintended consequences of that religious civil war is the emergence of secularism, because they saw that if religion is allowed to dominate the public sphere, meaning to say that it will always lead to the civil unrest, and it will always lead to the conflict in the public sphere. So religion needs to be separated, and religion needs to be kept out of public sphere, and it should kept in the personal domain so that people can live peacefully. This is how the Reformation, though it is a religious Reformation, and Martin Luther is a religious person, he actually wanted people to believe and practice Christianity in the public sphere as well as the personal sphere. And he actually wanted to democratize the learning and teaching process of Bible and through his reformative ideas. But secularism emerged in the West is an unintended consequence of that Martin Luther's project, because once he opened up and liberalized the Christian tradition, which actually led to the development of many new theological movements, and started to argue that it is also their arguments, their movements, and their ideologies also based on Bible. So which led to the more liberalized, democratized Christian theological environment, and created a civil unrest. So unintendedly, Martin Luther's project led to the emergence of secularism. So this historical process and evolution actually largely shaped the modern Western conception of religion and in religion in the modern sense. So modern Western philosophies or modern Western political theory largely been skeptical about the role of religion in politics because of these historical narratives and memories. And finally, some analytical remarks, some comparative remarks between between Islamic and medieval Christian theology. So reason and revelation, you see the Islam in the medieval world, actually even the rationalist tradition like Farabi also actually accepted reason and revelation, both accepted reason and revelation as a complementary sources to get guidance in terms of worldview and ethical concepts. But you see in the medieval Saint Augustine, he totally relied on revelation, and he actually very skeptical of reason. And if you go to Aristotle and Plato, they only believed in reason, and they never talked anything about revelation. So in Islamic history, you see both, even the rationalist traditions, they incorporated reason and revelation. In political authority, you see in the Islamic world, it sort of never promoted a concept of theocracy. Rather, Islamic political theory, as we saw in the last week, Islamic political theory always promoted the centrality of Islamic law, but it didn't provide it didn't allow any class of people to dominate the political authority. Always the political authority, Islam argued, lies with the people. Unlike the medieval Christian theology, we say that political authority is in the institution of church. Though the state, for the namesake, the state was there, but the real power with the church, since it argued that church is the superior institution and which is in the hierarchy above than the state. So real authority with the church. And the concept of good life, both in Saint Augustine actually said that human being cannot achieve good life here in this world. It is a sinful world. Your happy life only can be achieved in the hereafter. But in Islamic worldview, we saw that Mawardi and Farabi even provided, yes, that we need to achieve our good life and justice in the hereafter. But that does not necessarily lead us to believe that this world is a misery, or this world is all about sinfulness. No, Islam says that we can achieve happiness in this world and hereafter. But the important thing is we need to take the happiness in the hereafter into account while we enjoying in this life. So Islam is a balance in this perspective, saying that happiness can be achieved in this world and the hereafter. But medieval Christianity is different. As I said to you just before, its happiness is in the hereafter only, not here, mainly according to Saint Augustine. So these are some comparative remarks, and With this note, I will conclude my presentation. If anything, I can answer if any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Can we open the Q&A, Doctor? To all participants, you can raise up your hand if you have the question. I thought in the chat box also doesn't have the question, Doctor. Doctor, you unmute. You unmute. Doctor, you unmute just now. You speak. You cannot hear.
Okay, I couldn't see any. Someone, two participants has raised their hand, so they can ask the question.
Let me check. Yeah, they have two. Okay. Okay, Brother Azhari, you can unmute yourself. Yeah, but we cannot hear from you. Can you say something?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dr. Esi. Okay. I want to ask about its politics was Plato and Aristoteles Islam with Islam perpolitikan Islam. How thinking in Islam responded to this politics was Plato and Aristoteles? Or is possible that there are similarities that Islamic political expert or can use from this to Greek political expert? And what is the true position between political in Islam and Greece? Thank you, Doctor. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much for the question. And so, comparing the Aristotelian, Plato, and Greek period with Islamic political philosophy, it's a very good question. I would say, yes, there are some agreements with the Islamic conception of politics and also Aristotelian conception of politics. What are the main agreement, and which is about the role of politics in shaping public morality, meaning to say Islam also believe that politics is not just an end in itself, rather politics has a role in shaping the public morality, and also politics is very important in providing a vision, a moral and a collective spiritual vision for the community. And though the vision is different compared to the Aristotle's, and when we compare Aristotle and Plato and the Islamic heritage, the vision is different because Aristotle and Plato considered human being by nature as rational, and Islam considered human being as ethical and spiritual by nature. So there are some differences in terms of defining the essence of human being and the vision. Aristotle and Plato that argued that people can achieve happiness, the true happiness in this world through involving in politics. And Islam said, no, yes, we can achieve here happiness, but we also should achieve the true happiness. We should strive, or we should have an ambition to realize the highest happiness in the hereafter. These are some differences, but the common thread that is running through both Aristotelian and also classical Islamic political philosophy is the role of politics. they both traditions believe that politics is not just an in itself, rather it is an instrument to shape ethical, moral, and educational objectives. Unlike the modern conceptions of politics, which is very much material, it's so obsessed with the development, material developments, and providing. In today's world, politics is just disconnected itself from ethical and moral questions of the of the citizens. Rather, Aristotle, Plato, and also Islamic heritage believed and promoted an important conception of politics, which is very important, which is politics is education. It has a role in developing moral, ethical fabric of the society. This is the common thread. And there are differences, yeah. And so that's how sometime modern Islamic thinkers also, I have read a recent work on Islam and liberalism. He argues that in questioning the premises of liberalism, principles of liberalism in modern context, the author argues that Muslim scholars even can get some assistance and can get some inspiration from Neo-Aristotelians. Neo-Aristotelians mean those scholars try to critique liberalism, standing and critique liberalism in light of Aristotelian political philosophy. And so the modern scholars also argue, the Islamic scholars also can benefit from such trend to criticize liberalism. Why? Because both Aristotelian and Islamic political heritage share a particular conception of politics, which is politics is more than just providing material benefits and luxury to human beings. Rather, politics is all about shaping, cultivating ethical, moral fabric of the citizens and providing a vision for the community. And so in that sense, there is an agreement. But if we go into detail, there are some disagreements, which we can discuss in future classes. Thank you very much. I think now the time is up, sister.
Yes, Doctor. Because we passed 10 minutes.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
passed 10 minutes already.
Okay. Inshallah.
So thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you.
Alhamdulillah. We'll see you again in the next session, Doctor. Yeah. So sorry to the participant who have raised up your hand, but because of the time, we cannot answer all the questions that you want to question. So we will continue to the next session with Prof. Hazizan. Prof, are you here? Prof? Prof, I'm already made you as a co-host. Can you unmute yourself, Prof?
Assalamualaikum. You hear me?
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Yeah.
You can hear me clearly?
Yes, sure.
Good. Should I start now or?
Yes, sure. Okay. Prof, can you share this slide? Test to share the slide.
See?
You can make it bigger.
Is it okay now? Hello?
Yes. Okay.
Sajara, can you hear me?
Yes, sure.
You can see
like
the slide is this one is full screen, huh? Sorry?
Not yet full screen. Not yet full screen.
Oh, okay. I do not know how to make it full screen. Let me see. What appears on your screen?
It's appear, but without full screen.
Oh, without. Let me disable it. Yes.
But it's okay, Prof.
Now is it okay?
If
No.
it's okay if you can make it bigger.
You can see there two screen or two portion or one.
We can see
Okay.
what they call not full screen, but we can see the slide, Prof. It's okay.
Okay, let me try again. Maybe this time.
Yes, now.
It's
It's
okay.
already full screen. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
Shall I
Alhamdulillah. So
Alhamdulillah.
without further ado, the mic for you, Doctor. For you to
Okay.
Majura.
Thank you very much, Sister Daria, for hosting this, and I hope everything will go smoothly. Although we have some perhaps technical difficulties here and there. If not here, is there. So let me once again say salam to you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And also good day and good night wherever you are. So today will be quite what you call is a very, as usual, we have limited time. We have to cover a lot of things. My approach would be, I will leave some to be read by you when I send PowerPoint presentation or slide presentation to the organizer. You can see that. But for today, what I will do is just to firstly reiterate some of the points that I have mentioned in the last class, and from there I will connect to the next to today's lesson, so that we can see the flow of our discussion from the previous session. Yes, we have already lessons, and I was illustrating certain points in today's week. In today's week, and my friends also have talked about this in terms of this certification and ethics and sociology. Earlier, Aisha also talked about sociology, introducing sociology and the history of sociology. So it's in this context that we are moving on today. And as you could see, the first lessons highlighted the Islamic understanding of sociology and anthropology by basing on the premise that Islam is both a way of life and a comprehensive worldview. And this understanding has impact on our thinking about things, including thinking about society. Crucial to our understanding of Islamic perspective is the concept of Tawheed. Tawheed has been discussed in many ways, and in my context, I would like to emphasize the crucial concept of Tawheed in a framework of knowledge. It is the core in the framework of knowledge that provides a holistic view of man and human society in our context, and a holistic view of everything for that matter. When we reduce to our discussion of man and society, we understand that man in the context of Islam, or from the perspective of Islam, is a created being with certain purpose to be realized in this world. And therefore, our view about man and how it connects to the other aspects of society, including the relationship between individual and society, is to be analyzed within this broad framework. So dynamism in Islam takes place within this fixed framework of knowledge, that is topic framework. Now, then we reduced our discussion to only 3 questions when we talk about Islamic perspective. We tried to answer the questions what, why, and how. Since 2 key concepts here are Islam and sociology, then we move on by looking at what is Islam, and I have elaborated that. And to highlight only one piece of slide, we need to look at Islam as not only as a revealed religion, but as a comprehensive system of life and civilization. Only by having these perspectives on Islam, we will be able to talk about Islamic perspective of sociology or Islamic concept of society and so on. Otherwise, if religion is reduced to certain confined area, then we will not be able to see the connection. As for sociology, I was highlighting about looking at sociology as an academic discipline. And since this discipline addresses human society or mankind as a subject matter, then we also look at sociology from these two dimensions. But what is crucial to be highlighted, although there were 4 questions that I asked, the highlight here is that what makes things Islamic, including what makes sociology Islamic. I mentioned about the crucial keyword that is Islam itself as a deen, and in particular, the teaching of Islam about Tawheed as a concept and Tawheed as a framework, which consists of worldview, epistemology, and methodology as a result. And of course, when we look at the concept of worldview in greater detail, it will cover all these philosophical questions. Either these questions are ontological questions or teleological questions or epistemological questions. All this, to me, can be covered under one single term, that is worldview. Now, as for modern sociology, there are paradigms in modern sociology which are used to understand social realities and also social phenomena. These are the 3 typical ones. Of course, it has these have expanded, and there are other new paradigms developed, including neo-functionalism and so on, as well as the feminism or feminist approach to analyzing society and so on. Now, but what is the core of our discussion is how knowledge or science is to be understood comprehensively by looking not only at the typical topics that we have in English, how are these topics and themes are connected to the other layers of knowledge, which to me is very important. And if we are to talk about perceiving the things from some perspective, is where we need to look at in a comparative manner. Suppose we illustrate the sociology purport to have layers, then I would believe that the most. That is that would be from what we call ideology. Yeah, the ideological basis of any knowledge. But other than ideology, it is the ideology that is responsible for creating certain type of worldview, which become the underlying thoughts behind sciences, including social sciences. And therefore, this illustration is a modest one where I try to indicate the interconnection between what is the lowest and what is perhaps the common things to us. So behind what we have been studying, suppose we are talking about sociology and anthropology, and there are typical themes that we study: culture, social change and development, social stratification, research methodology, and so on. These are the typical topics which form a science, social science called sociology, for example. But behind that, we know that there are underlying principles which may be reduced to what I call worldview. And worldview consists of course, among others, epistemology. And this epistemology is influenced by certain ideology. So Western ideology, Western worldview, or worldviews in that sense, can be said to have been based on the man-made ideologies. You call it whatever, secularism, humanism, and so on. Whereas when we compare to Islam, the basis of all this, the source and also the basis of worldview and epistemology is Islam itself. So that's why I was saying that when we talk about Islamic perspective, then actually we are talking about what Islam says about whatever that we want to talk about. So I hope by putting this together, you can see the different patterns in the development of thoughts, but including sociological thought. So on the basis of this, therefore, if we want to answer the question, why Islamic perspective? Why do we need to talk about Islamic perspective? So according to A.R. Mohamed in his work, Introduction to Sociology and Islamic Perspective, among others, he has mentioned, and I quote here, as an academic discipline, sociology has been overwhelmingly influenced by the writings, ideas, and theories of Western sociologists. Therefore, we need a careful and critical scrutiny of that. And there is the author, A.R. Mohamed, is of the opinion that total rejection is not an option, and total adoption is also not an option. Therefore, what we need to do is to undertake a critical analysis of sociological knowledge in general and modern sociology and anthropology in particular, in order to unearth, in order to disclose what are the strengths and limitations of current body of sociological knowledge. So it is in this context that we are talking about the need for Islamic framework to guide us in dealing with all sources of knowledge of society. Yeah? And perhaps I put here one page of slide to indicate the flow of how we deal with the subject matter of a science like human society, the subject matter for sociology, in certain way, in certain methodological way, guided by or inspired by Tahdiq epistemology and worldview. And I tried to put all things together. And as I said, for lack of better illustration, I tried to use this frame in order to indicate how sociological knowledge can be derived and also constructed on the basis of Islamic worldview and Islamic epistemology. So I think we have done up to that point, and this is what I proposed, that we need to deal with the various topics in sociology and anthropology, the various themes in sociology and anthropology here in yellow, guided by the green. And the greens are reflection of what come from Islamic sources. And as a social scientist, then we need to be guided not only by what is derived or found in society, but also what is guiding what can be found in divine revelation. So I think we have stopped at here. So now for today's lesson, I will talk about sociology and anthropology, or SOCA, in Quran and Hadith. But secondly, I will not be able to cover all, and as always, I will somehow what I want to talk about in slide to be read by you later. What I'll highlight today is only on sociology and anthropology and the reflections from the Quran, and the Hadith we will find later in the slide that I will provide to the organizer. So since this is a continuation of the previous subject, I will further elaborate the role of divine revelation, because when we talk about how we can have Islamic based sociology or Islamically oriented sociology, the simple answer on the how is by subjecting knowledge of society to this framework, Islamic framework consisting of Islamic worldview and Islamic epistemology. Therefore, here, the role of divine revelation as a primary source of knowledge of sociology and anthropology is very, very important. And what could be the possible approaches in comprehending societal realities or social realities or social phenomena. So this will be the lesson, the session to explore Islamic epistemological principle more and look at some insight from the Quran. Maybe as for the how this can be used for analyzing social issues, I think that given the time this is too much to be accommodated, then I will give you some example later. In the last lecture, I was also showing you how we move from revelation from the Quran to institutional level by being inspired by what Al Quran says, and then we what we call philosophy of an Islamic institution. And I was only talking about the philosophy of education in my workplace, that is International Islamic University. Now, so with whatever little time left to us, we are going to talk about Quranic approach to sociological knowledge. I mentioned about the importance of a framework. What is a framework? Of course, there could be many ways how a framework can be explained, but I have here a few points. We can imagine that as a structure consisting of many components, many aspects, and the most important part of that particular structure is the foundation of that particular structure. I will, after this, give example, or rather an analogy, to demonstrate to illustrate the structure and where the foundation is, and why is this foundation important in understanding the knowledge or knowledge of sciences. I stress that although the foundation part is very important, but this is the part that is most neglected because it is quite not quite tangible, number one, and elusive, abstract, and of course unseen. So perhaps the easier way for us to comprehend the idea of Quranic approach to sociological knowledge is by having certain analogy. Knowledge itself is abstract, and we need something concrete in order to explain what we mean. So therefore, the first analogy that I would like to share with you is I want to analogize or equate knowledge to a concrete object that is common to us, which is a tree. Already we have defined a science as an organized body of knowledge, and as an organized body of knowledge, it has many components. Therefore, a science itself is a structure. A science itself is a structure. It has so many components. Depending on how you explain the various parts and components of a science, I would like to only use a simple analogy here, looking at the tree. If you look at the tree here, what appears to our eyes seems to be very attractive in terms of colors, in terms of the types of trees, and the proportion that exists between the branches and the tongue and the leaves and so on, and even the fruits and the flowers. So that is a tree. But this tree is what I call it. This tree grows on. These trees grow on surface, on the surface of earth or soil. Yeah? And what is there beneath the soil is what we cannot see. Is what we cannot see. Whereas that is the most important part of a tree. But we are attracted more to what we can see. And therefore, most of the time, even if we know that the foundation exists, the root exists, but we seldom talk about the root. So therefore, in order to make it apparent to us, even something that we cannot see with our naked eyes, then I bring here one picture from internet depicting the whole tree, which consists of two parts, the upper part and the lower part. So the upper part is this part that we are attracted most, but whereas the tree has this one. So this is what I call foundation, foundation or whatever you. So in the case of tree, of course, this is what you call the root. So root is the foundation for the tree, but the root has never been or is seldom talked about. It is recognized, it exists, then, but it is most neglected. The reason is very simple, because this is the part of the tree that we seldom see directly every day. What we see is the upper part of the tree, and we appreciate, we glorify, and we things like this, the upper part. All right. So therefore, this kind of appreciation is partial. This kind of knowledge about the upper part only is partial. We need to connect our knowledge of the upper part to the lower part. There is the foundation. And it happens that the lower part is the most important part. And it is the most neglected one, unfortunately. So if you are talking about either Islamic-oriented knowledge or secular-oriented knowledge, it is the root that we need to tackle. Not much in terms of what appear to our naked eyes at the upper part of the surface. Yeah? So there is one. And we can also have an analogy of knowledge to a building. I don't bring the actual building here to show you how nice some buildings are, but all buildings are having two parts as well. So as you can see, this is the foundation, invisible. and lies below the ground and just beneath the walls. The immediate thing, sometimes immediate part of the foundation also is here, lies between the floor and the ground. So depending on what type of building you have and how tall is the building, so the foundation, the ground, there is determined by the type of building that you are, that people are constructing. The point here is this: either in the case of the tree, what appear here is what is built is upon certain foundation, and in the case of building also, the building is built upon the foundation. Therefore, the foundation must be the first to come to our attention if we are talking about the whole building. So what I'm talking about now is about the most important part of knowledge that we should pay attention most. And the rest might, at certain level, they might be similar. At certain other level, might be slightly different, depending on the types and the places and so on. Yeah? Right. So on the basis of that, I again have come up with this. So most of the time, I was trying to indicate that this is the part that most of the time may not be dealt with or taken into consideration when we talk about knowledge, regardless of the type, the human sciences or social sciences or whatever. Now, why this happens? Because we have too overwhelmed. We have been too influenced by a certain way of looking at things by focusing only on what appears to our eyes, to our naked eyes, or what can be sensed by our senses. And beyond that, although we know that as a human, we have other potentialities in order to be used for understanding other realities, including ourselves, human, in a more comprehensive manner. So we are not blaming anybody, but somehow we have not been more told about this kind of thing so that we can see reality in a more comprehensive manner. Of course, I know that the main question would be how to do it, and I have dealt with this in other occasions and opportunities. But here, I don't think we have time to discuss that at length. But I would be satisfied if you are already able to see this stage that there is another part of knowledge that we need to pay attention. And contemporary Muslim scholars have emphasized very much on things like this, worldview and epistemology, maqasid. So all these terms are none other than to connect science and knowledge to something that is very crucial actually in the whole body of knowledge. So even with this one piece of slide, it is enough to indicate the reality of knowledge that we have to conceive. Now, so therefore, although we are dealing with or we want to study social reality, either man or society or mankind or whatever that we use, the terms that we use, but we must remember that human beings or mankind is part and parcel of the universe. And this universe is new things, created things. And who created this? Allah. So therefore, we need to view this in connection with the whole existence. And the whole existence that I have been talking all this while is can be reduced to this, that in the first place, nothing exists except Allah. Yeah, nothing exists except Allah. Then Allah creates, and therefore we have creation. And creation, because we are talking about human beings, perhaps one way of classifying creation is by classifying them into human and non-human. Non-human, there are so many realities, and within the human, and humans have been given divine revelation, and with this divine revelation, we are able to know not only about ourselves, we are able to know about God, about the other creation, and even about ourselves, and so on. So it is the revelation that tells us about other things. Some are in greater details, but most of the times they are principles, they are insights, they are guidance, and therefore holy books like the Quran is book of guidance, not a book of sociology, but book of guidance for sociological thought, which we are going to see soon after this. So I hope that when we talk, we understand that when we talk about human society, we must place our view in the broader context of the whole creation and the whole existence, the whole existence. Now, since we have established that from Islamic perspective, in the beginning, it was only Allah there. So the creation was not there, and it was created, and therefore it is only logical that we discuss ourselves in connection to who created us, that is Allah. And therefore, the whole of this is creation created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it is in this context that scholars have discussed and talked about many sciences and issues in society from the perspective of Islam. Now, I mentioned about references that perhaps we can rely for now to guide us in this very limited time of presentation. One of the works that I have consulted is Quranic Sciences by Abdul Rahman. There are many chapters. English, but the one that is close to us is chapter 23, and the writer of the author sense and teachings of the Quran under the title Sociology. So chapter 23 talks about sociology. So let us look a bit on this into what Sulaiman has mentioned. The Quran has added new dimensions to the study of physical and artificial phenomena because it has also included the sciences which are dealing with social phenomena. Now, so in addition to what we have understood about society and man from the conventional and scientific modern knowledge, Al-Quran also has added various aspects or input, has given many inputs. And one of the important things is that the creation itself or universe is not something that need to be seen in a negative manner. There are all signs that lead us to know God. So here is where I think the difference in philosophy and epistemology, the Muslims look at existence, including the existence of the created beings, as signs of the existence and also power of God. So therefore, Al-Quran invites us, man, study it, to study the universe and discover for himself the mysteries and wonders and endeavor to use its widespread resources for his benefit. So, creation is not our enemy. Creation is our friend. We need to understand them as much as we need to know each other among human beings. We also need to know what is given to us. And there is other creations or other creatures. So knowledge is basically continuous attempt at discovering mysteries and wonders in the universe. Therefore, when we study human beings, this effort is an attempt at finding or disclosing or looking at what are the laws governing the creation of Allah that we are in. So therefore, Quran takes man to God by means of his creation. So for Muslim, we look at creation, the universe. That study of universe can bring us or can lead us to God. So this is totally different from the secular perspective of knowledge, whereby you look at this as they are, and there is no connection whatsoever to the creator of what you study. So this is what I think makes things different and makes things Islamic when we talk about all sciences can bring people to God. Now, so that is one thing. Now, as for the sociology, Afzalur Rahman also mentioned about that the Quran is a book of guidance for man. And as such, the study of man and his social life forms is subject matter. And the Quran is a book of guidance, as I said. Now, therefore, for this guidance to be successful, it must cover what we want to know. And that is why in the Quran, we find many teachings that are relevant to man, not only for day-to-day living, but also to answer the questions that men might have in their mind for a long time as to the lofty ultimate questions, like what I mentioned. Many philosophers wonder about many things, which I will also show you after this. So this is what the Quran has done. It has studied and analyzed the fundamental principles that govern, influence, and mold man and his nature, ideas, values, institution, and even moral and spiritual concepts. So it is in this way that the Quran provides guidance. Then Afzalur Rahman has brought in some topics in sociology, normally treated in sociology, and bring insights or teachings from the Quran. So this is among others that you can see. This is another way of putting the same thing. But basically, as a conclusion, we can say that the Quran provides answers to big questions regarding human reality. So if we want to reduce to man and society as subject matter, then one of the things that we will look at is what are the big questions pertaining to man and society. I think this needs to be addressed first. In addition, the Quran also gives what Afzalur Rahman calls hints and tips here and there. So in the Quran, because it is a book of guidance, we cannot find one chapter on, let's say, social stratification, one chapter on culture. That is not the way that the Quran is presented to us. But we know as a comprehensive book, here and there it contains the insights pertaining to any issue that we are dealing with. And in this context, the issue of man and society. And therefore, even if we take the Quran itself, it provides lines for us to further explore, as well as our Quran provides a store of knowledge for study and research in the field of sociology. I think if we take the Quran and then we take the universe both together, then we have endless number of topics for us to explore. Yeah? But of course, given our limited life, then perhaps we can only focus on certain things. So these are the major themes in the Quran, in the book of Abdullah Rahman, Quranic Sciences, when he tried to look into the Quran, what are the verses pertaining to various themes in sociology. What I will do, I have already scanned this chapter, so I will send together with my slide organizer. You can share what our Quran says about family, what it says about education, and the needy. So these are among the sociological themes that are covered by Abdul Rahman in his work, Quranic Sciences. So as I said, it is impossible for us to talk about each of these here. Then example of this you can see there. But what is peculiar here is the fact that for Muslim scientists, social scientists included, is the fact that the sources of knowledge in Islam. So it is not confined only to what we can see in the universe like this one, but also it includes this one as well. I think this is another simple comparison for us to see the distinction between the conventional perspective of human beings or man and society compared to Islamic one. So Islamic perspective will certainly include divine revelation, the Quran and Sunnah as part and parcel of this. But what so these are the two broad categories of sources from where we can gain knowledge of anything, including society and man. But how are we going to use this? So we use human reason, we use human senses, and also other human potentialities. Now, here is where the debate over what would be the best way to gain knowledge about things, either Cartesian or other, is the debate over which one is more reliable or legitimate to be used for understanding things. The fact is that human being is a multi-dimensional being consisting of all this. He has human reason, he has senses, he has also other potentialities, which sometimes are much ignored by many people when they want to understand realities. So I think the integrated approach to understanding society, to make our knowledge of society more holistic, we need to use all these potentialities to inform us about that particular reality, human reality. So if we want to then illustrate this in this context, so therefore Allah has given us a Quran, and also through the Prophet provides further guiding operational things to us through Sunnah, and we, using various human potentialities, will have to study this and this and come to. And for now, of course, this has given rise to the various Islamic religious sciences, and this has given rise to many sciences. But we are unified in terms of looking at this under the same banner. the disciplines might appear to be different at certain lower level. But from the perspective of Islam, they need to be united at the level of philosophy, at the level of worldview, at the level of epistemology. And the engagement with knowledge process will have to be also guided by the ethical principles derived from this what you call this way of looking at things. So therefore, I emphasize very much on the importance of epistemology, because the concept of knowledge in Islam, therefore, is crucial. I'm looking at time now. It's already 12:38, Malaysia time, and I hope we have enough time. Now, yes, according to Mohamed, I showed you the book that is Introduction to Sociology and Islamic Perspective by Mohamed, and I quote here page 14, summarizing the principles and premises of Islamic epistemology. Number one, man is differentiated from animal. Number two, Islam, of course, through Quran and Prophet, has urged us to seek knowledge. Now, I want to highlight the number three, because this is related to what I mentioned earlier in the earlier slides. Islamic epistemology embraces a unitary cognitive framework that recognizes that there are multiple and legitimate sources of knowledge, including sense perception, imagination, self-reflection, and self-introspection, empathy, intuition, and sorry, not divine. This is wrong. So this is wrong. So divine revelation. So in other words, there are multiple ways or methods how we can derive it, as long as we are guided by the broader epistemological principle laid down earlier. So therefore, if today we rely on the various quote-unquote sources of acquiring knowledge of human society that we consult modern sociology, anthropology, we also look at the works of Muslim scholars of the past. We also conduct our own research and so on. And we also have Quran with us to dig into it, to look at the teachings of the Quran pertaining to human science, human reality. So these are the available sources. But when we have made divine revelation as the guiding principle, therefore, the place of divine revelation in the context of knowledge pursuit should be the guiding principle or the guiding source. The guiding source. It is a source, yes, because it provides many types of knowledge, answers to philosophical questions, hints and tips about family and so on. Yes, it is a source of knowledge about human being, but at the same time, it guides us to use other sources, particularly in using the Tawhidic framework that I have mentioned earlier. And how to develop a science of sociology with Islamic orientation, I will just go quickly on this, and later you will get it from this one. We need to talk about human nature, and many disciplines have already focused on understanding human nature. There are many teachings, of course, but here I just give what is taken from Mohmed's work. I already mentioned about the Quran that provides a fundamental philosophical question, and it covers questions about epistemology, metaphysics, logic, ethics, and others. For example, if you want to develop a set of Quranic answers to philosophical questions, you may perhaps do like this. You have questions, and what are the Quranic answers to this, and so on, either about man, about knowledge, you identify what are philosophical questions, and so on. But what I would like to give here is simply some examples of this, where Islamic theories of human society will be based on the responses. I mentioned about big philosophical questions that philosophers ask, and I have already looked into the Quran or some Quranic reflections. I'm sorry that I have to ask you later to look into all these things when you receive my slide. So this is from what you call this from there are many verses that I have quoted here. Al-Baqarah, verse 30, Al-Insan, 1 to 2. And then when we want to answer where did we come from, Quranic answer, we can consult Surah An-Nisa, number 1. And then also from At-Tin. And then all this nature of man can be inspired by the. As for the question, what is the meaning of life? We also have, for example, these are the questions about the meaning of life, and there are Quranic verses pertaining to this. So I just show you very quickly, and then later you can look into this. And another question is there life after death? And also we have all this. And in sociology, we talk about ideal concept of society. We already learned about Marxist concept of society and capitalist concept of society. Islam also has this. Okay, so I think I will just provide all this to you, and also how to reconstruct sociology on the basis of what I have mentioned earlier. Again, I benefit from the views of A.R. Mohamed. You can see later. And as a conclusion, we can say that the entire content of Quran are meant for mankind to know about realities or existence, and subsequently translate that Quranic knowledge into human life and activities. And this include question about God, reality, and so on. When we talk about society, there are also other big questions about man and society, as well as the specific questions about man and society. So this is what we are trying to do. But due to the limitation of time, I have to say sorry that, yes, I want to convey many things, but I have to also give some preference to certain aspects only. But the rest you will get from the slide, and also the reference material that I will send to the organizer. I think that is all for today, Sister Jaria. Thank you, and I'm sorry for taking the time.
Prof.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah, but the participant also they enjoyed it, so I just let the time go on. So thank you very much, Prof, for your great presentation. And because we already past about 15 minutes, so maybe we cannot answer the question, Prof.
It's okay. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, but for me it's okay if you can just answer one question because already we can see in the chat board, so you can answer one question.
Normally what I will just cut and paste, and then later I will respond. But anyway, I will pick one here. Anything. So I'd like to know, how can this kind of Muslim scholarship, Islamization, Islamic approach model be promoted or applied in Muslim community within a non-Muslim or secular state? I think this is a very great question. As much as I share with you, I also have the same question. But anyway, slowly I begin to see or explore the various ways how we can do it. Yeah, we must start from ourselves first. For example, because we cannot talk about something that is big when we ourselves is not demonstrating the applicability of what we are talking about in our small context. So we move slowly from small context to the broader context. Now, perhaps I can mention this. Let's say I am in the International Islamic University, Malaysia. Of course, you can say that, of course, there is not much problem here. But I think still we have problem in terms of addressing the question of mindset, in the sense that we have long been influenced by the typical way of thinking about and almost anything, including the way we look at social reality. And this is triggered by, or this is due to the secular mindset and worldview. And to deconstruct this is not that easy. Overnight we can do it, no. But I think we need to develop what we understand as the Islamic worldview or integrated worldview to be taking place first within our own context. And I can mention here, because it has been already officially launched by the university, that we are thinking of developing what we call the Gombak Integrated School of Thought in Social Sciences. Meaning that, what does it mean? The noble philosophy and mission and vision that we have at this university, we believe this is universally applicable. But for this to shape our mindset, we need to alleviate this to a certain level where we can call it school of thought. But this school of thought is not like school of thought that we are talking about, school of thought in Islam, but like creating typical standard mindset among social scientists in the International Islamic University, Malaysia. And later, if this typical mindset based on it, philosophy of the university is already standard to all social scientists in this university, then perhaps we can promote further to other institutions and to other countries and to perhaps to the Ummah later. We are doing it, and we are now at stage 2. We visualize this to take place in 3 stages. We have started last year, launched in September 2023. Now we are entering second stage, and we are moving to the third stage to institutionalize this within our institution first, and later we'll see how it goes. So I think there must be some kind of strategic thinking and working from a smaller context to the broader context. Wallahu alam, I hope I respond to your question.
Thank you very much, Prof, for your answer the question. There is a continuing of question, but we cannot proceed for more because now already near to 1 o'clock already. Thank you very much for your kind presentation and interesting. I hope we can see you again in the next session, Prof.
Inshallah.
And thank you very much to the all participants also. Inshallah, we will see you all again in the next Saturday. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Assalamualaikum.
We end our class, yeah.